And here's a rundown of the key points from Quiz 9. So, Alexander, this can obviously be argued from either direction. This is a subjective impression about whether Alexander was worthy of this towering reputation and legacy that he has passed down from 2,300 years ago. But you need to be specific about why it is. I don't like him. It's only a starting point. Not that that's not valid, but you need to have specific reasons. So, why would you say that Alexander is not great? Well, one is that he made these accomplishments on the back of achievements of his father, that the advancements in military technology and tactics were all Philip's, and that Alexander just benefited from them. That, for that matter, the plan for the conquest of Persia was originated by Philip. We don't know this for a fact, but we have a sense that this was where Philip was going in attempting to unify the Aegean, and Alexander picked up on his father's plans when he became king of Macedon. In terms of Alexander being great as a human being, he slaughtered thousands and thousands of people and subjected them to external rule. He made a number of mistakes that cost his own men dearly, most notably the significant massive losses caused by the retreat through the desert from the Indus. He did not provide for his own succession. There's a little bit of an out here because he was very young, but nonetheless, he's also in a very dangerous business as a king and a conqueror and a warlord. If you buy the story that his last words were that his empire should go to the strongest, then this brought about a great deal of further war and conflict that he could have done something to prevent. The other thing is, in terms of his conquest of the Persian Empire, he doesn't deserve full credit for this because part of this is inherent in the nature of the Persian Empire itself. The Persian Empire was successful in seeming not to be oppressive, partly because it did not have standing armies, and so there was actually relatively little in the way of a determined external invader. His initial encounters were with regional garrisons of the satrapies, and Darius was only able to throw together very hurriedly a massive untrained army to stand against Alexander in the final battle. So, the things that you might want to say if you were of the opinion that he truly is great, that he moved beyond merely being the kind of king that Philip was, that he had a greater vision, a greater sense of responsibility that brought about a different kind of conquest with a different kind of goal than Philip would have had. His military accomplishments in defeating the Persian Empire. The fact is, the Persian Empire is the greatest empire that this part of the world had ever seen. This defeat required a great deal of ingenuity with an impressive command of strategy and tactics. And perhaps most of all, his intended goal to bring about cultural fusion was successful. The lasting impact of Hellenization and the creation of the Hellenistic era throughout the entire civilized world, as it stood from the standpoint of the Eastern Mediterranean, from Bactria to Egypt, all of this is brought under a new cultural connection, a new sense of cosmopolis that changed the human perspective, that's brought people to see beyond their own immediate horizons and had an immense, immediate and lasting impact on human knowledge, creative expression, and the nature of society. Why did Alexander treat Persepolis different than he did Babylon and Susa? The context here, Persepolis is the show capital of the Persian Empire. The actual administrative capital is Susa. Susa is a very old city and remained useful under Alexander, under other conquerors. Persepolis was created by the Persians as a city to demonstrate the wonder of Persian rule. And so it's filled with monuments and great buildings designed to glorify the concept of Persian dominion. There's no practical element to this. This is where all of the regional subject kings under the Persian Empire, they came to Persepolis to pay respect to the great king and to provide their tributes. But it exists solely as a visual glorification of Persian dominion. And so it was important symbolically for Alexander to destroy Persepolis in order to demonstrate the destruction, the permanent end of Persian rule. Susa, much older. Babylon, much, much older. The Persians are relatively recent comers to this part of the world. They're purely an Iron Age phenomenon. Babylon reaches deep back into the Bronze Age. And so by taking control of Susa as a practical administrative capital, he's taking the reins of this part of the world by enthroning himself as king of Asia in Babylon. He makes himself the replacement for the Persians and a connection to the immense, towering presence of Babylon in the Mesopotamia and well beyond. So the sack of Thebes, this happened almost immediately after Alexander becomes king, and he has to go down to Thebes and make an example of it. The rest of these are true. Athens said that they would help Thebes, but backed away. Alexander marched his army down to Thebes in record time. The neighbors of Thebes, if you remember from the discussion of the 4th century crisis, Thebes had bitter enemies amongst its neighbors in Boeotia. Boeotia was like, Thebes deserves to be punished. So the thing that's not true here, news of Thebes weakened his rule. On the contrary, Alexander does this in order to make an example of Thebes, and it works. No one else rebels against Macedonian dominion. The Romans do the same thing 200 years later in destroying Corinth for the same reason with the same effect. You destroy one city is all you have to destroy. Describe the significance of as many of the following battles as you can. Granicus is where he enters Anatolia and defeats the satraps. Issus is the decisive victory against Darius. Gaugamela is where he defeats the Persians despite being outnumbered, and that's the final fall of the Persian Empire. And Hydaspes is the very costly victory at the Indus, annexing the Punjab, but leading to rebellion amongst the leaders of Alexander's armies. And that's the end of the quiz. Please email me with any questions.